Hello, my name is Alicia Sloan, and this is my Class to Life presentation on Chapter 4 from our text, Identifying and Describing Constructively Responsive Comprehension Strategies in New and Traditional Forms of Reading. This, of course, is from our textbook, The Handbook of Research on Reading Comprehension. In the beginning of the chapter, it initially describes what a reading comprehension strategy is, and it quotes several researchers what they found reading comprehension strategies, including Kinch, Alfabach, Pearson, and Paris. And to simplify kind of their quotes, reading comprehension strategies are when the reader is making specific attempts to break down the text, to understand the text, and to make meaning from it. And then it goes on to describe some more about reading comprehension strategies. They vary in form and function, and they have different levels of demand on readers. Initially, when a reader is using a new strategy, it might take a higher demand on them, but as they progress, it would have a lower demand since they are getting more proficient at using it, and it's developmental. They're becoming better at using it. So reading comprehension strategies are just like the readers who use them. They're developmental. And they're part of constructively responsive reading, because good readers know and use many different type of procedures when they're coming to terms with understanding their text. So a good example of this was on page 70 of our textbook. There was a paragraph, and it talked about using reading comprehension strategies, and it was about Native American arrowheads, and it was talking about how it was difficult and how the reader of the textbook might have to use those strategies. So I found myself having to reread, go back, and it mentions that it didn't have, bulleted points or that are typically found, in informational texts. So if you did not catch that the first time reading, I would go back and check it out. So there's a lot of value in studying reading comprehension strategies, and there has been a lot of research about using them already, but there's still a lot more that we can benefit from by researching these strategies. First of all, it reminds us what an achievement reading is, and it can contribute to theories of cognitive processes. It gives us insight into the workings of the mind and what's going on when people are reading, and it gives us more information about the construct of reading. And this can help us improve our education when we're teaching children to read. And on page 72, it describes how we can do a better job with teaching methods, with modeling, explanation, and thinking aloud with these reading comprehension strategies. So some approaches to investigating these strategies, or some methodologies for collecting data about them, would include verbal reports and protocol analysis, theoretical task analyses, eye movements, self-reports, or reading strategies, process logs, interviews, questionnaires, and retrospective reporting. In verbal reports and protocol analysis, we find that verbal reports are kind of advancing, and they're doing a really nice job of exploring hypertext and internet and a lot of those new literacies that we're finding about, where protocol analysis is something that we've used more frequently in the past for gathering information about comprehension strategies. And both of these are when a reader describes what's going on, describes what they're doing throughout their reading processes. And both these work well with traditional one reader, one text, and multiple text interactions, so when a reader is reading multiple texts from different authors. Okay, theoretical task analyses. These actually help us predict what strategies a reader will be using at a specific point in time and how they're using it and for how long they're using it. So on page 75, there's a nice kind of summary quote about this type of methodology. And it says, in other words, the role of theoretical task analyses in studies on reading comprehension is to fill in gaps from experimental data with clearly specified theory of what may be occurring while building an inferential bridge between real mental processes performed and verbal repost data produced during the reading. So it helps us infer what's going on with readers and when it's going on. Okay, eye movement data was quite interesting to read about in the chapter as well. This doesn't really give us as much information about specific mental processes, what's going on in the reader's mind, but it's really quite fascinating that these researchers have broken apart the whole reading process through what's going on with readers' eyes. So it's through their motions of the eyes. So the fixations are how long a reader's eyes fix on a point when they're reading. And the duration, the fixations are where their eyes are fixed during reading. The fixation durations are for how long they stay fixated there or look there. And the saccades are the reader's eye movement from fixation to fixation. So, or it's the regression if their eye moves backwards. So this gives us a little bit of information about where the readers are in their place, but as I mentioned before, not as much about their mental processes. Self-reports. This is another methodology for collecting information about comprehension reading strategies. This includes process logs, interviews, questionnaires, and retrospective reporting. So all of this type of data or methodologies, they assume that the reader can and is aware of the processes, the strategies that they're using, and will be able to report what strategies they're using. And so some see this as a major flaw within these because they say that readers don't always remember, or their memory is affecting their report. But they still can offer a lot of insight into reading comprehension strategies. So recent research within comprehension strategies, there are two major forces that are kind of shaping the recent research. So there's cognitive strategies. Some researchers are setting out to describe the cognitive strategies of readers, while others are trying to contextualize what reading as a cognitive process and relate it to the situations where readers are doing work. So looking at it at the reader's strategies or the cognitive process or looking at it as a whole cognitive process. And then on page 77, there is a lovely table about all of these different reading comprehension strategies that have been put together. And these were based on different studies that are current, and then these were broken down further into three major categories. So either these comprehension strategies are helping readers identify and remember important information, or it's helping them monitor their own comprehension, or it's helping them evaluate their comprehension. So looking at this, I see a lot of things that I do, or in my teaching, with my own students. Now, teaching kindergarten, a lot of this I do at a very simple level where I'm activating and using prior knowledge. If we're reading a story about fall and there's leaves that are changing color on the front, I'll say, I'll ask them questions. What season do you think this book is in? Or when after we're finished, I'll say, can you tell me what happened in the story? Or even if we're reading the story and they're decoding, I might ask a student who, in a small group, who did decode the word, I'll say, how did you know that word said that? So often students will tell me, oh, I looked at the picture, or oh, I sounded it out, or I looked at the first letter, Or sometimes they'll just say, I just knew that. And so I try to avoid that, and we try to think about how we knew that. Another interesting area of research is content areas and domain knowledge. So in the text, this is described as, how you read a textbook, a social studies textbook differently and from a science textbook. So these are related to reading comprehension strategies, but I just want to clarify that these are not the same thing. They are more specific, and they have to do, like with the example from the book, how you would read your social studies history book. You would look at, is it a first person narrative of this, or is it from someone who has a clear bias about what happened or the event? So those type of things that you would do that would be just specific to when you're reading your social studies book, whereas when you're reading a science textbook, you're looking to obtain information. Maybe you're looking at bolded words and tables to help you get the main points. Okay, so reading comprehension strategies for multiple text. As I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's when one reader is reading multiple texts, and that's by different authors. So this is wonderful that this happens, that people are trying to get more information about things and to become more educated. This could be for a project, this could be for pleasure, this could be for a lot of reasons. But obviously different authors have shared different information. Sometimes this is conflicting, sometimes this fits well together. But the reading comprehension strategies for this, basically it's when the reader takes all of this and contributes it to their own global or their own personal understanding of the topic as a whole. So on table 4.2 on page 80, this gives how comprehension strategies are used with this type of interaction with text. Okay, then also very exciting is how reading comprehension strategies change for the internet and hypertext. And I did include the definition that this chapter used for hypertext, which was by Rasmussen, and it says hypertext is made of blocks of text in the form of written text, pictures, video, and sound, chained together by electronic links. So these are related to, and they sound very similar to, initially, multiple text comprehension strategies, because you're getting information from different sources. And again, this could be conflicting, this could go together quite well. But the book makes a very clear distinction that these are different from that, because while multiple text strategies, you're just reading two different sources. Whereas with hypertext, it's not a clear path. It might be different each time you click on something, and it's not the same experience. So therefore, it's a very different type of comprehension strategies, because you don't quite know what you're going to get, which is different from opening a chapter book and reading two different books. So these comprehension strategies are listed in another table on page 83. And then some areas for future research on comprehension strategies just include more information about them. As we mentioned before, there are a lot of benefits to these and to how we educate young readers. Content domains, this is again how readers are, when they're reading for specific purposes, how their reading is changed in multiple text when readers are reading from lots of sources, how they're helping shape their comprehension with strategies. And with hypertext, the internet that we just talked about. But also, so more information about all those types of comprehension strategies, but also we can also find more contextual influences of reading by doing more research about comprehension strategies. And finally, by doing more research about this, we can find more We need more about using comprehension strategies from start to finish and the whole process of reading from start to finish.